morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I'm also going to be our guest speaker for today. So we are on the last day of May. May is always a great month here because we celebrate biodiversity. May 22nd is the International Day for Biodiversity, and we're going to wrap up May with an event looking at a lot of biodiversity. Before I get into today's event, I want to remind everybody that June is around the corner. And that's the last month of the school year. So a lot of classes in the US have already started their break. But then over the next few weeks, more classes in the US as well as Canada will start to go out as well. We are not quite done here. If you go to exploringbytheseat.com and Ocean Week, we have a ton of World Ocean Week events next week to check out. So visit Ocean Week if you want to hang out with some ocean researchers, some ocean explorers, take a trip to a penguin rehabilitation center in South Africa. We have a lot going on celebrating our ocean next week. Okay, let's get right into it because I have a ton that I want to share with you today. For those who don't know me, I am the founder and director of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And a few weeks ago, I was able to go on a really awesome trip to Peru. While I was in Peru, I spent most of my time in the Amazon rainforest. So this spot in Peru is one of the most well-protected places still left on the planet where you can explore the rainforest and see biodiversity in a way that it's hard to do in other places around the world. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to do... I've got a ton of photos and video clips I want to share with you. We'll play some Kahoot today. And then, of course, we'll build in a lot of time for questions. So if you are joining in via YouTube, use the chat sidebar. Let us know where you're joining from. Send in some questions. I've got camera classrooms backstage. We'll visit those classrooms as well to get their questions too. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. And in a moment, we should be able to see the presentation come up. I'll do my entire screen today and PowerPoint, and let's go full. Okay, and I will hide that as well. So this should be nice and full screen for everybody. If for some reason it's not, turn your mic on quickly and let me know, and I'll just swap the displays. But it looks good on my end, so let's get started unless I hear otherwise. So let's look at the world first. I'm up here just outside of Toronto in Southern Ontario, here in Canada. I spent the time down here in South America in Peru. So if we get a little bit closer, you can see this nice map of South America, and you can see this big chunk here along the Pacific. This is Peru. Peru is an amazing country. It is full of varied ecosystems, from dry desert to cloud forests to mountain ranges to Amazon rainforest. So I spent my time in this area here. This is right kind of around the border of Bolivia and Brazil and the rainforest. So where I went is a wonderful national park called Manu National Park. It is completely protected. There's a big buffer zone around it. No one's allowed to live in there. No one's allowed to work in there. It is very well protected. It is old growth rainforest, so it's never been logged before. And so the biodiversity, this is one of the most biodiverse places left on our planet. So let me take you in there and show you what it was like. I'm going to take a little detour first because I arrived in Lima, which is about 11 million people. It's the capital city of Peru. And then I took a quick flight to Cusco. Cusco is 4,000 meters in elevation. So usually people will go there and have to acclimatize for a few days to get used to the height. But I didn't have that much time. I only had a day before I went to the rainforest. But I really wanted to see Machu Picchu, which is an amazing Inca site located, I almost want to say cloud forest area in Peru. So it was quite an adventure just to get there. I had to get up at 4 in the morning and take a 2-hour shuttle drive to the train station. Then I had to take about an hour-long train ride. But I got off the train early. I jumped off at a place called Kilometer Marker 104. And when you get off there, you can hike to Machu Picchu instead of driving up to it in a bus. And so this was quite a hike. It was 22 kilometers. I think my steps that day were over 25,000 steps. And it's pretty much all climbing, going higher and higher and gaining elevation. So it was a crazy walk, but it was absolutely worth it to be able to walk into Machu Picchu through the Sun Gate. So this is not Machu Picchu. This is just some ruins at the beginning of the trail. So there's Inca ruins kind of sprinkled throughout this area of the world. And you can see, if you look along here, you can see the train runs along the river. So you jump off the train at the side of the river, cross a bridge, and then you start climbing up into this valley. This will give you a little idea of what the hiking is like. So you can see how far below the river is now. This is my guide, Elio, up here. So him and I did this walk together. And you can see that we're going up. And you can also see that the trail's very thin, and then it just drops off right into the valley. So here we are making our way still further along the trail. And in the distance, you can see some ruins. This is not Machu Picchu. This is called Winiwea. And this is an agricultural sector that the Incas would have used. So they carve these terraces into the hill. We'll get a closer look in a minute. And they grow their crops in these terraces. So if we go a little bit closer, you can see a little bit more what it looks like. So these terraces are cut into the hill, and this lets them grow some crops. Of course, they had some buildings here. And then you're already exhausted, but to get up here, you have to go up over 316 steps. And then we're only halfway to Machu Picchu. So it is quite a journey. So this is coming through the Sun Gate. So you can see here, this carved into the side here. If I had gone all the way to town and taken a bus, it takes you right up. But instead, I chose the hard way. I chose to do the big hike. And so this is my first view of Machu Picchu coming through the Sun Gate. And then there I am with my guide. We're pretty excited. It was a long hike. We had our lunch up there before we started heading down. And so if you look here, you can see this, the ruins here of Machu Picchu. It was a really sacred site for the Inca. And it was one of the few spots that the Spanish didn't discover. So the Spanish came through and they looted, took gold from a lot of Inca sites. They destroyed a lot of villages and sacred areas. But Machu Picchu was so rugged and so hard to get to that the Spanish never found it, which is why it was so well preserved. And you can see why if you look at the area surrounding it. It would not be an easy area to explore, to hike through, or to find. And then on our way down, we had to get through security. So the llamas move freely around the site of Machu Picchu. And then there we go, one more view of the ruins as we got a little bit closer to this amazing spot. So a little detour before I headed into the rainforest. The next day I had to get up at 4 a.m. again, and I met this guy. This is Satu. Satu is an amazing naturalist. He is one of the top birders in all of Peru. And so him and I spent our time together in the rainforest. He was my guide. And to get there, we had to start on road. So we left Cusco at 4 a.m. and we drove pretty much for an entire day. Along the way, we made lots of stops to look for birds, to take pictures, and we drove deeper and deeper into this cloud forest. So the cloud forest is a little bit different than the Amazon rainforest. It's higher, so the weather's a little bit cooler. It's very often, especially in the mornings, bathed in this little bit of cloud cover as water is evaporated from all of these trees, all of the plants. And it's where all the water gathers. So all the rain falls in the mountains, runs down through the cloud forest into the Amazon basin. And a lot of the water is collected from the cloud forest to make up the rivers that make up the Amazon. So we saw lots of things along the way. Here is a blue-banded toucanet. So they're very similar to toucans. They're just smaller in size. Their bills are a lot smaller as well. This is your proper toucan. This is a mountain toucan. So you can see the beautiful colors it has here. And what's pretty cool about toucans is you would think that these beaks are really heavy, but they actually aren't. They're very, very light, and they're filled with blood vessels. So one way toucans cool themselves off is by running blood through their bills. So the blood runs through their bills, it loses heat to the environment, and that helps cool off their bodies. This is the national bird of Peru. This is the cock of the rock. And so we found a group of these. It's called a lek, when all the males get together and they sing and they dance to try and attract females. So this is a male cock of the rock. This is the national bird of Peru. Peru, like many other places in the rainforest, is really rich in hummingbirds. So this is a Gould's jewel front hummingbird. This is another one. This is a swordbill. And these hummingbirds here, the swordbill has the longest beak compared to its body of any bird in the world. So if you look at the size of the beak on this swordbill, it's pretty much as big as the hummingbird itself. And when you see them landed somewhere, this is how they look. They kind of hold their bill up in the air. This is another tiny little hummingbird called a rufous coquette, and they have this kind of spiky little rusty colored plumage, feathers on their head. And to give you an idea of the size, if you hold up your thumb, that's probably about as big as this hummingbird is. They're not very big, and they don't hold still very much. So you have to be pretty quick to get a picture. And this is one of my favorites. This is a rufous-booted rackettail. So if you look down below, it's got kind of rusty colored feathers over its feet. So that's where the rufous-booted comes from. And then these two little feathers are called rackets. So that's where it gets the name rackettail. Rufous-booted rackettail. Now, there's monkeys in the cloud forest, but they look a little bit different than the ones you'll see in the Amazon. Because it's colder in the cloud forest, they need more protection. So this is a woolly monkey, and you can see it's got kind of a big furry coat that helps it keep warmer in the higher elevation of the cloud forest. So we found a couple of these woolly monkeys right at the end of the first day. It was just starting to get dark, and we found a couple of them moving through the trees and eating some leaves before the day ended. The next day we drove quite a ways longer, but then we ran out of road. So we came to the end of the road and we had to switch to an electric canoe, a motorized canoe. And this motorized canoe was our vehicle for the rest of the time in the rainforest. It took us way into the rainforest. We had no hot water, no electricity. We didn't see any other people the entire time we were out there. It was absolutely perfect. It was amazing to get away from everything and just be living in nature in the wild for a period of time. So if we check out this video here, this is the Madre de Dios River, and that translates from Spanish to Mother of God. And it is the main river that runs through Manu National Park. And it eventually goes into Bolivia and connects to the Amazon River. So this is one of the tributaries, one of the rivers that collects water and then flows into the Amazon River. So this is a drone shot here. It looks really fast because I sped it up a little. I want to show you a few videos today. So I sped this one up a little bit so you can get a feel for the river, what it looked like. And then when we got onto the river, we were at this little village, and you can see all of the canoes lined up along the river. So we took one of these canoes, and this was our transport for the rest of the time in the rainforest. So what does it look like? This is a GoPro time-lapse video moving down the river. So you can see there's no houses, there's no people. It is just river and rainforest all day long. So this, every 10 seconds, my GoPro took a picture, and that's how this time lapse was made over the course of the afternoon as we went down the Madre de Dios River. There'd been a lot of rain in the few days before, so the river was really high and it was moving really fast. And the first wildlife we came across was this peccary. It's a wild pig. And for whatever reason, this peccary decided it wanted to swim across the river, which was a pretty risky thing to do because the river was running very fast and very high, very full of water. So this peccary was battling the river for quite a while. but there must have been some good food or something on the other side. It did eventually make it to the other side. So a happy ending for this peccary. It made it to the shallows and then to the other side of the river. So lots of animals will cross the river, like tapirs and peccaries, and even jaguars will swim across the river to get to the other side. The air was always full of birds as well. So these are blue and yellow macaws. You always hear them way before you see them. They are so loud as they fly through the sky. We saw a bunch of different macaw species, and I'll show you some more pictures as we go along. At one point, we stopped on the river. We got off the river and hopped into a 4x4 truck, and we drove across some water. We drove through the jungle, the rainforest, to a farmer's land, a farmer's property. Then we hiked for about half an hour to a spot on his property that had a huge nest. And this nest belonged to a harpy eagle, one of the biggest eagles in the world. They're very rare and they're very hard to see. They hunt in the canopy of the rainforest. They have massive talons. Their talons, the claws, are as big as grizzly bears. And they hunt sloths and monkeys in the canopy of the rainforest. So these are massive, massive eagles. And like I said, we were lucky enough to find this one on its nest. And even better, it had a chick. So you can just see the chick's head peeking up from the nest here. So to see a harpy eagle in the wild is pretty rare. It was worth taking a big detour from the river to find this nest and to see one of the largest, and if you're a monkey or sloth, one of the most dangerous eagles in the world. Along the river, you always had to keep your eyes peeled because there was so much wildlife everywhere you looked. This is a capped heron. Here are some wood storks on the side of the river. Beautiful rosette spoonbills. So they get that name because their beak basically looks like a spoon. And they use that to kind of sift and filter through the water. And then along the river, you'll find things like these Amazon turtles. And so these turtles, usually when you saw them, they were covered in butterflies. And that's because the butterflies like to lick salt off of them. So around their nose, around their eyes, they can get a little bit salty from their tear ducts and things like that. And so the butterflies like that extra salt. And so they like to land on the turtles and then use their little tongues that they use for nectar to get the salt off of the turtles. The turtles didn't really seem to mind. And the butterflies, like this one here, had 4 butterflies, different colors, different species of butterflies, all waiting for their turn to get a little bit of that salt. This is a capybara. So capybara are rodents like squirrels and mice and rats that we have in Canada and the US. They are the largest rodent in the world, and they are aquatic. So they spend a lot of time in the water. They're also a favorite prey of jaguars. So one thing that I was really hoping to see in such a remote area was a jaguar in the wild. So we'll have to stay tuned throughout a little more of this presentation and find out if I was that lucky. So one morning we got up nice and early. I've got another time-lapse video here as we made our way down the river and the sun was rising. And we went to a spot called Blanco Oxbow Lake. And an Oxbow Lake is, well, I've got a video here I'll show you. An Oxbow Lake is when the river bends so much that it pinches itself off and it goes in a different direction and it leaves behind a lake like this. It's called an Oxbow Lake, kind of shaped like a crescent. And then that becomes a habitat for caiman, which are very similar to crocodiles, for giant river otters, all kinds of bird species, fish, lots of things call these Oxbow lakes home. Eventually, this lake will be overgrown by vegetation. Eventually, it will disappear, but that's still a ways away. It'll still be a great habitat for all kinds of plants and fish and birds and aquatic animals for some time to come. Now, when we got there, the guide said that he could call a caiman, and I didn't believe him. But when we got there, he started calling Panchin, Panchin over and over again. And sure enough, a caiman started swimming over to the dock where we were getting on the little canoe to paddle through. So here we go. Here's a caiman from above. Again, these drone shots are sped up a little bit so that we can watch some of these clips. So this is a caiman. This is Panchin. And Panchin followed us most of the way as we were paddling in the Oxbow River. But then when we got to the territory of the giant river otters, Panchin left, because believe it or not, caiman are very afraid of river otters. River otters are big, they are strong, they have big sharp teeth, and they're tough. So caiman don't want anything to do with a family of river otters. But these river otters are so playful. They swim through the water together, they make lots of noise, and then they catch fish in their hands like this. And then watching them eat is pretty funny. They are very messy eaters. They spin around in circles. They make a lot of noise while they're eating the fish that they catch. So it was great to see some of these river otters in this Oxbow Lake. So there's a few pictures of the river otters. There's lots of other life around the Oxbow Lake. This is a hoatzin. They are actually very similar to cows. Cows have 4 stomachs, and it helps them digest grass. Hoatzin have 4 stomachs. It helps them digest the leaves that they eat. So these are a very primitive bird, and they burp a lot during the day. Stinky leaf burps, because it's so hard to digest the leaves that they eat. There's Amazon kingfishers hunting for fish along the lake. There's striated herons like this one. This one just caught a fish on the lake. And then there's predators like these tiger herons, which will eat fish and lizards and snakes and frogs, whatever it finds along the side of that river. So I've got another video here. This is where we stayed in the jungle. This was called Manu Bird Lodge. It was just me and my guide. No electricity, like I said, no hot water, and just surrounded by rainforest. So again, this is a sped up drone video. As far as you can see, rainforest and river, the Madre de Dios. So just a little idea of where we were and why we were able to see so much biodiversity, so much living things. So that is where we were. So remote. Now, the wildlife, like I said, is amazing. This is at sunrise. This is chestnut macaws. Here's a roadside hawk. They get their name because when you're in areas with more people, they like to sit on the side of the road and look for things like mice and lizards and things like that. There's lineated woodpeckers, like this one here with this fiery red crest. And then if you're really careful and you are really observant, you can find camouflaged animals like this green boa, this green tree boa. Really hard to find. Their camouflage is absolutely amazing. They don't have any venom, but they constrict their prey. So they slowly squeeze and suffocate their prey. So these guys are really hard to find. So I felt pretty lucky. Every night we went out and explored the rainforest, because at night new things come out. So this is a tropical screech owl. This is a bullet ant. They have one of the most painful bites of any insect in the world. For 24 hours, you will be pretty miserable if you are bit by a bullet ant. There's poison frogs, poison dart frogs, like this tiny little one here. It doesn't look very tough, but its markings tell predators to stay away. The toxins are strong enough that if a predator eats it, it could actually kill that predator. There are lots of other frogs in the rainforest at night. They have beautiful camouflage that help them blend into their surroundings. And then there's things hunting the frogs, like this false viper. So vipers are venomous snakes. This is not a viper, but it looks like one. Its head is shaped very similar. So it's not an actual viper. That's why it's called a false viper. But it looks like that, so it can fool would-be predators. Then there's more boa constrictors, like this Amazon boa that we found hunting frogs in the swamp. So it would very much be looking for a frog like this, hanging out in the trees, like this beautiful tree frog with its violet eyes. There's another picture of that tree frog. There's frogs in the trees. There's frogs in the rivers. There are frogs along the trails, like this waxy monkey frog. I also spent 2 nights sleeping on a platform next to an open area of dirt. Now, you might wonder, why would I spend 2 nights sleeping on a platform next to a pile of dirt? And the reason is this is a clay lick. And a clay lick is where mammals will come to find minerals that they're missing in their diet, like salt. And so they'll come at night and they will eat some of the clay to get those minerals. Now, I was hoping for a tapir. Tapirs are the biggest mammals in the rainforest. They have a little snout that looks like a small elephant's trunk, and they're rare to see. The first night, I had no luck. The second night, I woke up because something was snuffling all around the dirty, muddy clay lick. And I had one chance to turn on a spotlight and take a picture. And I got this picture of a tapir. I think this is probably a female tapir, and my guide thought maybe it was pregnant as well because it's quite bulky. So you can see its little snout here looks a lot like a small elephant trunk, and you can see it was digging really deep into the clay lick to eat some of the clay to get some minerals it was missing. But birds need those minerals too, like parrots and parakeets and macaws. So this is a different spot. This is a clay lick, but this is more visited by birds. So this whole exposed area is clay, and the birds will come down and eat some of those minerals. This is not one of those birds. This is a different one. This is a horned screamer. I had no idea that birds could have horns, but here we go. There's proof right here. This is a horned screamer. It is a big, loud bird in the Amazon. Now, before the bird showed up, this deer came first. This beautiful roe buck deer came to nibble on some of the clay lick to get some minerals, some salt. Then the birds started to come. So these are some little parrots, little mealy parrots. So you can hear they're nice and loud, and they're getting some of that clay. Now, after they had their turn, next up were the macaws. These are red and green macaws. They came to take their turn eating some of the clay and getting some minerals that they were missing from the fruit diet that they eat. So here's a couple of them flying. Here's a few more. You can see these two here, both of them have mouthfuls of clay. And then a few more shots of some of those red and green macaws. Now, I promised I would tell you, did I get lucky and see the thing that I wanted to see most of all in the rainforest? And the answer is yes. We had just left the clay lick. We were on the motorized canoe going down the river when I saw something coming out of the water. And I started yelling at Satu that there's a jaguar, there's a jaguar. And sure enough, this jaguar had just crossed the river, had swum across the river and was getting out of the water. When it heard us in the canoe, it ran into the bush. So I got to see it, but I didn't get any pictures. So we pulled the canoe up on shore and we sat quietly and we waited. And I waited and crossed my fingers, hoping that it would come back out to dry out. And about 20 minutes later, it did come back out to dry off a little bit. It walked a little ways down the beach and then it disappeared back into the rainforest. So I hopped out of the canoe to take a couple pictures of the paw prints it left behind in the mud. So again, jaguars are super rare. Not many people get to see them. If we'd been a couple seconds earlier, we would have missed it. If we'd been a couple seconds later, we would have missed it. It was just one of those right place, right time, really lucky moments. Now, down in the basin of the Amazon, in this part, in Manu National Park, there are 15 species of monkeys. So we already saw the woolly monkey from the cloud forest, and I saw 4 more species while we were there and managed to photograph 3 of them. So this is a red howler monkey. Every morning at 5 in the morning, they get up and yell and screech at each other. It is like being in Jurassic Park. 5 in the morning, every morning. It is a crazy sound that they make. These are the saddleback tamarins. So another species of primate, another species of monkey that kind of jump around through the trees. And lastly, we have these titi monkeys, and they are super curious. So if you find one in a tree, it will stick around. It'll even get closer to really take a good look at you and try and figure out what you're all about. Here's another picture of these titi monkeys, and this one has a baby riding on its back. All right. Well, that is what I wanted to show you today. I want to take you on a little trip into the Peruvian Amazon rainforest in Manu National Park. It's absolutely beautiful, an absolutely amazing place. And so now I want some questions. But before we get to the questions, I want to play some Kahoot. So I pulled together a little Kahoot quiz here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to hit start on the Kahoot first. That's pretty important. So we'll play some Kahoot, and then we'll spend the rest of the time just taking all the questions that you might have for me. So coming up with the share screen now. You want to go to kahoot.it, and the number is 306 8760. If you have something at your seat that you can use, great. You can use that at your seat. If not, your teacher could maybe bring this up at the front of the classroom for you, and you can shout out your answers to him or her. Or don't worry about it if you can't join on a device. Just shout out your answers, see how well you do in the end. So we'll give a couple minutes to get students in with us, and then we'll play our Kahoot together. I've got lots of questions here coming in to the chat. One here is about humid. How was the weather? It was really, really hot. I think most days were up over 40 degrees Celsius. So what that meant was pretty much just the fact that I was alive meant that I was covered in sweat all day and all night. So if you want to go out into the rainforest and you want to explore the rainforest, you have to be ready to be uncomfortable. It is very uncomfortable. It's very hot. The sun is very strong near the equator. There are tons of insects that very much want to make a meal of you. It's muddy. It's dirty, but it's the best. It is one of the most fun weeks I've had in my life, was being out in the middle of the rainforest with my camera and with my guide Satu. We had a great time. Another question, why are the birds so colorful? And believe it or not, well, there's two reasons. One is, especially for males, if the males are bright and colorful, that tends to attract females. So if you can have those bright colors and you can still survive, that gives the females a clue that you'd be a really good choice for a mate to raise chicks with. Also, believe it or not, those colors can be really good for camouflaging in the rainforest. There's lots of different colors, sunlight filtering through the rainforest, fruits and things like that in the trees. So believe it or not, in the really thick rainforest, those bright colors can actually help with camouflage. Okay, let's get going. Let's play some Kahoot. So there are 4 questions, I believe, for today. The quicker you get the right answer in, the more points you're going to get. Here we go. All right, true or false? The Madre de Dios translates to Mother of God. So Madre de Dios translates to Mother of God. Is that the name of the river where I spent a week going through the Amazon rainforest? Does it translate to Mother of God? All right. Good job, crew. That is absolutely correct. Madre de Dios translates to Mother of God, and it's a tributary of the Amazon. And eventually in Bolivia will feed into the Amazon River. And that puts the decisive lemur in first place. Here we go. Multiple choice. Mammals and birds visit clay licks for protein, for minerals, for vitamins, or for carbohydrates. So which of those 4 things do they visit for? Protein, minerals, vitamins, or carbohydrates? A couple more seconds to get your answer in. All right, it is minerals, especially salt. The diet of many plant eaters and fruit eaters in the rainforest does not have enough salts. So they go to these clay licks, they eat some of the clay, and it kind of boosts their body with some of the minerals that they're missing. Okay, next question. Decisive Lemur still in the lead. Here we go. Another multiple choice coming your way. Peru's national bird. Is it the Amazon kingfisher, the mountain toucan, the scarlet macaw, or the cock of the rock? So which is Peru's national bird? Amazon kingfisher, mountain toucan, scarlet macaw, or the cock of the rock? All 4 birds can be found in the Amazon, but which one is the national bird of Peru? A couple more seconds. All right, it is the cock of the rock. It is the national bird of Peru. We've got one more question coming your way. The wonder owl has taken first place. True or false to finish off? Capybara are the world's smallest rodents. True or false? Capybara are the world's smallest rodents. All right, that is absolutely false. They are the largest rodents in the world. They are aquatic. They love spending time in the water, and they are definitely a favorite prey item of the jaguars. So jaguars will wait by the river for the capybara to come down. Okay, let's take a look at our podium. In third place, we've got the elated gecko. In second place, we have the mighty condor. And holding down that top spot, we've got the wonder owl held on for the last 2 questions. All right. Thanks a lot, guys, for playing along. Let's wrap up. Let's do a whole bunch of questions. I want your questions about the rainforest and the animals and Peru and whatever comes to your mind. So let's start visiting some classrooms here. We're going to go to Farmington first. We've got some summer school students hanging out with us. How are we doing today, Farmington?
Doing good.
All right. Who's got a question?
This is Asa.
Asa.
Alright. Is there any invasive species in the Amazon rainforest, and how are they combating them?
Okay. So I think that was invasive species, and was it how are they combating them, getting rid of them?
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. Anywhere where there's people, there's usually invasive species. So a lot of them are plants. So plants that people bring in for different reasons. Sometimes it's because they think they look nice. Sometimes it's because they can be a good source of food. So plants are definitely a good example of invasive species in the rainforest. There are some species of fish that were brought in for different reasons, like sources of food that can get loose into the river and cause trouble. And then insects can be brought on different products. So when we move things all over the world, we ship things around, you can get insects that hitch along for the ride. And so in a lot of national parks, they do try and do things to mitigate or get rid of those species. They'll try and go out and harvest plants and things like that and remove them from the environment. But to be honest, it's not an easy thing to do, especially in a place like Manu National Park, because there's isn't a lot of trails, not a lot of people visit. So places like Manu National Park are kind of a little bit protected from invasive species in that they're so busy and full of life that it's harder for invasive species to take hold. Whereas places where the rainforest has been logged or degraded, affected by humans, it's a bit easier for invasive species to take hold. So I hope that helps with some of your question.
Thank you.
All right. You guys got another one kicking around there, or should I come back in a minute?
Yeah. Carson, come ask yours.
All right.
Did you experience or see anything dangerous?
Honestly, the most dangerous thing I saw in the rainforest was people. So on our way out of the rainforest, we had to come back to where people were. So there's two little towns. One's called Boca, Colorado. One's called Puerto Maldonado. And there's a lot of illegal gold mining that happens in that area. So they strip the forest. They pull the little bits of gold they can find out of the river and other places. And you can imagine that it's illegal. And some of those areas can be a little bit lawless. There's not a lot of people there. There's not a lot of policing. So to be honest, I think people were the most dangerous things I encountered towards the end of the journey. Even the jaguar, it doesn't really want anything to do with people. They can usually hear people coming from a long ways away, and they move away way before people even know that they're there. So it was actually really lucky that I had a chance to see the jaguar. There's snakes, of course, venomous snakes. But again, they're not looking for you. You'd only really ever be bitten by one if you stepped on it by mistake, which is why we wear big boots, big waders. And then if you grabbed one, of course, then it would probably try and bite you. So yeah, there's poisonous things in the rainforest, but they usually don't want anything to do with you. So
Thank you.
good question. All right, Mrs. Duran's crew, how are we doing today? All right, let's get that mic unmuted and let's grab a couple questions.
All right, so in grade 3, we learn a lot about plants. So we have a couple questions about the plants in the rainforest.
Go for it.
Sorry, Danny.
What are the plants in danger?
Yeah, good question. There are some plants that are endangered in the rainforest. Usually they're plants that people like because they like to take them and sell them and grow them at home. And so a lot of the species of plants that are endangered in the rainforest are because people like to take them. There's also some species of trees that are pretty rare in the rainforest. And the areas where people log the rainforest, where they cut down the trees, that leads to trees and other plant species becoming endangered. And then as our climate changes, so as we warm the planet, as we take more trees from the rainforest, it becomes harder for the plants to grow in the rainforest. There's not as much rain, the soil changes, and it's harder for them to grow. So for that reason, for those 3 reasons, people taking plants, people logging the rainforest, and our planet getting warmer, that means that our plants are starting to become more endangered in the rainforest.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Do we have another question there?
Yep. Here, Brayden.
So my question was, is there any food supply of plants in the rainforest?
Any food supply? Oh yeah. Yeah, there's lots of plants. Lots of plants produce fruits. Lots of plants produce nuts. So a lot of the fruits and vegetables that I ate while I was in the rainforest came right from the rainforest. So there's lots of fruits, lots of nuts, lots of roots and vegetables that can be grown in the rainforest. Tons of food for plants, for animals. So yeah, loads and loads of food. And then the number one thing that people grow that I noticed was plantains, which are like a banana. So there was lots and lots of people when we got closer to the cities again who were growing plantains in the rainforest. Very much like a banana.
Thanks.
All right. Let's visit Mr. Steltman's crew. 5th graders hanging out with us. Do we have a couple questions?
All right. Here you go, Sam.
Are those your photos? And if so, how did you learn to take such good photos?
All right. Those are all my pictures. I will show you my best friend. Well, really anywhere I go, especially somewhere like the rainforest, is this. This is the camera that I use. Yeah, it's a Nikon. It gets a lot bigger when I want to zoom in on something. So this is my best friend in the rainforest or anywhere else that I go to take pictures. And then I can change the lenses. So if I want to take pictures of scenery, wide pictures, I can use this lens I can put on instead. If I want to take really close-up pictures of frogs and insects, this is my macro lens. So I can put that one on instead. And this is my big telephoto lens. So this lets me zoom in and get a lot closer on some of the wildlife. So I haven't really taken any courses about cameras. I watch YouTube videos sometimes and I practice. So even if I'm at home, I go out and I practice taking pictures, and I practice taking pictures when it's sunny. I practice when it's cloudy. I practice taking them at night, when it's warm, when it's cold, because then when I'm out somewhere like the rainforest, or I was just in the Galapagos a few weeks ago, then I'm ready. I don't miss the pictures that I really want to take because I've practiced a lot. So that's how I've been getting better at taking pictures when I visit places. All right, we have another question there.
Yeah. Clara, you want to do yours?
What happens when you get bit by a bullet ant?
By a bullet ant. Okay, so bullet ants aren't venomous. They don't have any venom, but they have those massive, big pinchers. And so I've never been bitten, luckily. I took pictures of the bullet ants, but I left them alone. But what I've heard is that it's kind of a shooting pain that runs through your body right down to your bones. It hurts a lot. I've heard that it can be really painful for anywhere from 12 to 24 hours after you've been bitten by a bullet ant. So they have one of the most powerful bites of any insect. So yeah, I would highly recommend, if you see a bullet ant, to just leave it alone. Don't try and pick it up. Again, it's not going to come after you. It's really if you do something to bother it that you'll probably get a bite from a bullet ant. Also in the rainforest, it's important to keep your boots upside down at night and to shake them out in the morning, because spiders, scorpions, ants, they like dark spaces. So they might crawl into your boot. And that's the last thing you want, is to put your boot on in the morning and get stung by something that was hiding out in your boot. All right, I'm going to swing through the classrooms one more time. There's a couple more YouTube questions I'll answer. So Mr. Steltman's crew, do you guys have one more question?
Mute us. There you go.
When toucans are born, were their beaks like all those colors?
Yeah, no, they're way smaller, of course. They're not as brightly colored. When a toucan's born, it looks like a little pink kind of naked bird. So it takes quite some time before the bill grows, before the feathers start to fill in. So they really are quite helpless when they're born. A lot of toucans will nest in a tree, in like a crevice or a hole in a tree. And sometimes the male actually seals the female inside the tree. So uses mud to kind of seal the tree. So there's just a small hole, and that protects them from predators. And then the male will deliver food, fruits, lizards, whatever it can catch, kind of nonstop to the female who's trapped inside the tree. But it's a good way to protect them from predators. All right, going in reverse. Mrs. Duran's class, do we have another question?
Yes, we do.
Is there any poisonous plants?
Are there poisonous plants? Absolutely. So it's not like a snake, right? Like a snake, they have their venom. If they're hunting, they use the venom. If something grabs them, they use the venom. Trees, it's different. Trees use the venom to protect themselves. So if a herbivore comes along and eats the wrong kind of tree, it can feel sick, the wrong plant. And so it won't eat that plant again. Also, some plants can do something really cool. They can communicate to each other. So if an animal starts to eat some leaves, that tree, that plant can send a signal to warn other plants to start producing toxins in their leaves. And then they don't taste really good anymore, and the animals will stop eating them. So believe it or not, plants can actually communicate with each other through chemicals and through signals in their roots when their roots are connected to each other. So that's pretty cool. We don't think about plants being able to talk, but they can actually communicate in other ways with each other.
Very cool.
That's a good question. Farmington, do we have another question?
How steep is the trail to Mountain Picchu, and what equipment did you use to keep safe?
Oh, for Machu Picchu. Okay. Well, it wasn't really mountain climbing, so I didn't have to have any ropes or things like that. There, sometimes in countries like Peru, if it were the same hike, maybe somewhere like the US or Canada, they might have a lot more railings and things built in. The hike that we did, there were no railings. You were really close to the edge most of the time. So really, it was just having really good shoes with really good grip, so that I didn't have to worry about slipping or falling. And then, like my guide said, stick to the wall. So always stick to the side of the trail where the wall of the mountain is, and don't get too close to the edge. So it was a big hike, 22 kilometers. It wasn't the safest hike because a lot of times we were right along the edge of really steep cliffs that dropped off into the valley. But it wasn't the kind of hike where I needed any gear. But the last 50 steps to get to the Sun Gate, they call it, what do they call it? What's the exact word? They call it I think they call it the Gringo Killer. And that's sometimes what they call tourists in places in Latin America. And so those last 50 steps are so steep and you're so tired that a lot of people fall. A lot of people have to take big rests, and you're kind of crawling on your hands and knees up those last 50 steps. So those last 50 steps, I think, were the hardest of the entire journey. And the local guides like to make fun of the tourists because it is so hard for them. But the local guides have an advantage. They live in higher altitudes. They're much more used to working hard in high altitudes. So they have an advantage when they're up there. Okay, a couple questions from YouTube here really quickly. How is the soil different in Ontario? Well, in Ontario, the soil is a lot thicker and it's not as acidic as the rainforest. So the rainforest soil is full of lots of nutrients, but it's very thin. And if you cut down the rainforest, the soil can wash away really quickly. So it's much harder to regrow rainforest in those areas. So it's not as thick as we have here in Ontario. It's more acidic. And then the top layer is really built of a lot of fallen material, branches, dead trees, leaves, things like that. And it's thin, so it washes away if you deforest those areas. How many different species of animals? Well, I know that there were probably over 2,000 species of birds. I know that there were hundreds of species of mammals, thousands and thousands of species of plants. But the really cool thing is we don't have an answer because there's still a ton for us to discover in the rainforest. Plants, animals, insects. There are species that we have no idea even exist. So in the whole world, we've named about 2 million living things. Some scientists think there's as many as 10 million different living species on our planet. So we still have so much left to explore or discover. Mr. M's class wants to know, how do rainforests prevent climate change? And the biggest things that rainforests do is they store carbon. So we produce tons of carbon dioxide when we breathe out, when we burn fossil fuels, oil, gas, and things like that. That carbon can be captured by plants because plants use carbon dioxide for photosynthesis to make energy, and they store that carbon inside of them. So the rainforests are huge stores of carbon. However, when we cut down the rainforest, when we burn the rainforest for cattle pasture, we release all that stored carbon back into the air. So the biggest things that the rainforest can do to help with climate change is to store all of that extra carbon, as much of it as possible. So that's the biggest things that they do. Last question, did the jaguar look at me? It did look at me. It was pretty far away, so I wasn't very worried. And to be honest, it did not want me around. It left pretty quickly the first time we came around when the motor was running on the canoe. And even when we were sitting in the canoe being very, very quiet, I'm pretty sure it knew we were there. So it was still pretty cautious. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of biodiversity to end off your May. The Peruvian rainforest is an amazing place. It is pretty special to see the rainforest exactly how it should be, with as few people damaging and affecting it as possible. And it gives you some hope that even though we've done a lot of damage, that nature's resilient. If we leave it alone, if we give it a chance, it can fix itself. It can restore itself. It can grow back. So we have to give nature that space, and then we can have those beautiful areas of biodiversity, which are healthy for the planet and healthy for us, because the more biodiversity we have on Earth, the healthier we are, and the better chance we have of combating climate change, resisting diseases, and things like that. So thanks for hanging out. I hope you join us in some ocean events next week. We have a jam-packed week coming up. But for now, I'm going to sign off. And yeah, hopefully we see your groups before the end of the school year. So thanks, everyone.